Starting with Monday's Telegraph, and it seems the BBC is being as impartial as ever.
It's the Newsnight story of an interview with Angela Rayner. It says Newsnight admits omitting, which surely that counts as a self-out if it omits. You omit and omit. Anyway, omitting Beergate comparison from segment recorded last month after concerns from Labour staffers. And I'll just clear all that up because that didn't make much sense as a thing. This is to do with the investigation into claims that Miss Rayner wrongly declared which house was her permanent address in the electoral roll, which is, of course, a criminal offence. And this the story pertains to the interview for Newsnight, in which they cut part of the interview where she was asked whether she would take responsibility for this and step down. And the argument is that they decided to take it out because it wasn't relevant at the time because she hadn't been charged yet by Manchester police. On the other hand, it's a bit suspicious because they also had a call from the Labour Party straight after the interview saying, just knock that on the head. And they said, yeah, maybe we should do that because she's on our side. Then they said, oops, we didn't mean that.
Yeah, but why?
That's exactly what happened.
Why wouldn't they do that?
Why wouldn't they do what?
Why wouldn't the BBC cut it out? Because the Labour Party are going to be their new bosses. Because the BBC is Big Brother broadcasting.
They're impartial.
They're supposed to be impartial, but you love them. You love them. This country loves the BBC. The BBC.
That's not me what I love.
You don't. All right, sorry.
You know, they're all right.
But you don't mind them.
If
you don't mind them, the point is that the BBC, if we didn't pay for the BBC, no one would care if they cut anything out. They might find it interesting. Oh, look, the BBC cut it out. Oh. But because we pay for it, because they're not supposed to cut it out.
I actually disagree with you because I think it's more than the money. It's the trust that we have in it or don't have in it. As an institution, I find
they don't deserve any trust.
Well, I mean, I believe that less and less so for sure. But when you read an incident like this and you see them, it feels to me like, Kerry, that they're sort of mealy mouthy, trying to get out of it. Because the way that he says, oh no, it was still definitely impartial, but the way his excuse was like, oh, it didn't really matter because technically the police weren't investigating. But actually, the question was, if you were found to be guilty, well, you'd only ever be found to be guilty if the police were investigating. So it just seems like they're trying to just come out on a technicality here.
I generally agree with you, but at the same time, I'm willing to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt. I think there's been more times recently where the BBC has shown a questionable bias that should be discussed more and looked into. But one like this, it could well be that he simply left it out of the interview, not feeling it was that important at that time. So I'm willing to.
Who owns the BBC? Who owns it? Listen, this is not my country. But who owns it? Answer the
Lewis,
question.
you know what? Forget the BBC stuff for a second. I want to ask you a question about Rayner because there's a lot of criticism that I've been seeing online and in editorials and other news channels where they kind of go, oh, what's the point of going into this because Rayner, she's Labour, but it's, we're talking about £1,500 and an offence from 10 years ago. And there's a part of me that is sympathetic to that. But, of course, we're also talking about hypocrisy, right, and whether someone lied or not, and then being an elected official possibly soon. So do you care about this story, or do you think it's been blown out of proportion?
You know what? We've all done scummy things like that.
What?
I'm not saying I have. I'm not saying I have. I don't want to be. You know what the worst thing is? I don't want to be accused of a hypocrite. We've all done whatever we've done. The fact is that I don't like what Angela Rayner did. I don't care. Tories, Labour, scum on a pox on the country. I care that people love the BBC. And I think the BBC should be defunded. And if you love the BBC, you love it. And if you don't have to pay for it.
Okay, well, it's a shame the story is also really about Rayner. But yeah.